About a year ago, I went camping near a quiet village to escape the busy city and relax in nature. However, my plans took an unexpected turn. It was mid-August, and I had just broken up with my girlfriend and needed some time and space to move on. What else could be a better idea than camping? While driving towards the campsite, suddenly out of nowhere, a black cat jumped in the middle of the road right in front of my car. I quickly hit the brakes and narrowly saved her. It was a jet black cat with yellow golden eyes that were now staring at me. I cautiously drove over to her and observed her through my mirror as she continued to stare at my car. I moved on, eventually arriving at the campsite. It was already dark, so I had quickly set up my tent. I noticed that black cat again, watching me from a distance. Despite this, I didn't think too much of it at the time. It was strange that she followed me all the way, but then again, that wasn't why I was there after all. Worrying about a random black cat, I simply brushed it off as a coincidence and continued with my setup. Soon, the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped the surroundings. Everything was going as planned except for one thing. Every now and then, that black cat would pass by my campsite, its eyes reflecting the light from my fire and adding to my unease. I busied myself cooking dinner, but I couldn't divert my mind from it. I had a feeling of not being alone, constantly feeling watched. After dinner, I decided to push aside the unsettling thoughts of the black cat and went out for a small walk around my camp area. It was relaxing, and throughout that time, I didn't see the black cat. It must have been a coincidence, I thought. After about 20 minutes, I crawled into my tent, hoping for a peaceful night's rest. As I lay there, ready to drift into sleep, a sudden voice shattered the silence. A voice so strange that it sent a shiver down my spine. Grabbing my torch, I stepped out of the tent and scanned the woods, expecting to see someone or something, but there was nothing, just the stillness of the night. My gaze shifted to my car parked nearby, but it too stood empty and silent. I felt scared. The darkness and the strange events of the day made it worse. I've always enjoyed camping alone, relishing the peace and being close to nature, but this time it was different. I was experiencing a deep fear that made me question every sound and whisper in the wind. All I wanted was for the night to pass as quickly as possible. Returning to my tent, I was met with a sight that froze my blood. The interior was splattered with bloodstains, and the cat was right there in the corner within my tent. It was wildly eating an animal, apparently a rabbit, I guess. What sent chills down my spine was the cat's sudden movements, its neck twisting unnaturally as it locked eyes with me, its mouth stained red with the fresh kill. I was scared as hell. I rushed out of the tent, leaving everything behind in a hurry, and rushed outside to get my bag. I had left it there when I was searching for my flashlight. After finding my keys, I got into my car and drove away from that terrible place. I just prayed that I would not encounter that cat during my return. The experience was very unsettling, and I decided then and there that I would never go back to that camping spot. The image of the black cat, motionless with a bloody face and not at all playful, still haunts me. It's a memory that still gives me chills. I decided to camp outside my town because I was curious and wanted an adventure. The area had a spooky reputation, as locals shared strange stories of unusual happenings. I was the kind of person who always used to debate the existence of otherworldly things. I believed that people were just being fooled by others and believed it to be ghosts. That campsite was also one of them, labeled by everyone for its horror events. I wanted to experience it myself, so one weekend I packed up my stuff and headed towards that spot. By evening, I arrived at the campsite. It was a very beautiful sight full of greenery. The cool thing was, I was not alone. I saw another tent at a distance from where I decided to set up my tent. I did the necessary stuff as I knew I needed to set up camp before it got too dark. However, as I reached for my matchbox and lighters, my heart sank. They were nowhere to be found. Panic started to set in as I made sure to pack enough supplies and backups for any situation. But there I was, the careless one as always. I frantically searched through my backpack and pockets, hoping that I overlooked them, but no such luck. The thought of spending the night in the cold, pitch-black forest was alarming, as any animal could attack this way. I knew I needed to find a solution fast before the darkness swallowed me whole. I remember the tent that I saw earlier and thought it would be best to ask them for help. As I headed towards the tent next door, I saw two kids laughing and playing nearby, and there was a young man in his 60s setting wood for a fire. I approached them and greeted them. The man was quite frank and a nice person. When I explained my problem, he offered a lighter and also invited me to have dinner with them, which I politely declined. He told me that the kids were his children and that they were locals who usually come here for camping. We chatted for a while. Then, thanking the man, I returned to my tent. As the night wore on, nothing unusual happened as I heard. On the contrary, I quite enjoyed the sight and peace of nature there. Later that night as I was sleeping, I suddenly heard distinct blood-curdling screams. I woke up to see big flames from nearby where the other family was camping. I quickly ran towards them to see what was happening. When I reached them, I saw something horrifying. The whole family was engulfed in flames, screaming in agony. I wanted to help them, but it was too late for me, and there wasn't much water around. In a panic, I didn't know what to do, so I ran back to my car and drove to a nearby local area to ask for help. At first, nobody agreed to accompany me to that area, especially at night, but I forced them. It was about someone's life after all, and eventually some of them came with me. Panic set in when we reached the area. There was nothing there. It was strange, and I had no idea what was happening. We scanned the area, searching for any sign of the man, his tent, or remnants of the fire that burned so fiercely just minutes ago. But to my horror, there was no trace of the fire, no ashes, no charred wood, just an empty space. Everything I saw was not a dream or hallucination as I checked my pocket and found the lighter still there. I don't know what happened that day, or what that person was, a human or a spirit, but it changed my whole perception. During my high school years, I went on a camping trip with 3 of my closest friends, John, Linda, and Carlo. We were a group of 4 friends and were always ready for adventure and traveling. We had gone on many other trips together, and this time we decided to camp deep in the heart of a dense forest, far away from the bustling noise of the city. Our campsite was near a serene river. We packed up and started our journey on Friday morning. It was almost 2 hours away. As we arrived, we quickly found a place to set up our tents. Later that evening, we started exploring the surroundings. It was indeed a very beautiful place full of nature. We went hiking and climbed the nearby hills, enjoying the stunning views of the forest. We shared stories, laughed, and played games. It was a memorable experience. I had a habit of carrying my diary everywhere with me, in which I used to write my feelings and literally everything about me, along with all my secrets. That day, as dusk approached, John and Carlo were busy setting up a tent and gathering firewood, while Linda, always the playful one, decided to play a prank on me. She snatched my diary and took off running, laughing mischievously as she did. Without a second thought, I chased after her. We went quite far from the campsite in that game of ours. Linda stumbled on a root and fell. Concerned for her well-being, I rushed to her side, helping her up and ensuring she was all right before hurrying back to our campsite as it was getting dark. When we reached back, I reminisced about my diary that I had almost forgotten about. I asked Linda about it, and she said she might have dropped it when she fell. After dinner, we went to sleep in our tents, but my thoughts kept drifting towards my diary. I couldn't shake off the feeling that my most intimate secrets were out there. I knew it was almost impossible for anyone who knows me to get it, but it still irritated me. I wanted my diary back. So, despite the growing darkness, I knew I had to retrieve it. And so, silently, without disturbing my asleep friends, I set off alone. It was all dark in the forest, silent except for the rustling of the leaves under my feet and the occasional hoot of an owl. With a torch in my hand, I kept going into the woods. After a walk of about 8 to 10 minutes, I arrived at the spot where I had left my diary. After looking around with my torch, I finally found my diary on the ground at a distance. My heart eased a bit. As I took a step closer, I realized that someone was standing there. It kinda scared me. Who could be there at this hour in the forest? I raised my torch to illuminate the dark figure in the shadows. There, by a twisted tree, stood an old lady in ragged, dirt-stained garments. Her skin was weathered and pale, stretched too thin over her skeletal frame, emphasizing her jagged bones. Deep wrinkles traced her face, and her eyes were sunken and devoid of life. Her appearance really stopped my heart from beating. My instincts forced me to run, but my body refused to cooperate with my mind. I stood there, frozen in place, looking at her. She was also staring at me with her dead eyes, without blinking. And then suddenly, she smiled in a very creepy way, her lips cracked and stained. A true evil smile. Everything blacked out after that. When I regained consciousness, I opened my eyes to find my friends surrounding me, their voices a mix of concern and relief. I was lying on the riverbank. They asked me what I was doing near the river, but I had no answers. My diary was nowhere to be found, and the memory of the old lady's eerie smile and her gaze that chilled me to the core still haunts me. To this day, I wonder about that strange encounter in the forest, the unanswered questions, and the thought that the old lady took my diary, leading me to that distant spot near the river, fills me with unease and terror.